Thank you, Chairman Green, Ranking Member Thompson, members of the committee, for inviting me here today. Since 9/11, every president has stated that defense of the homeland is the nation's #1 priority. And despite this attention, as President Trump takes office this week, the homeland has never been less secure. While America does remain at risk from physical attack by terrorists and even missile attacks from Russia and China, the most persistent vulnerability is the threat of cyber attack. And make no mistake, China is America's most capable and opportunistic cyber adversary. Look, China's not alone. As was mentioned, Russia, Iran, North Korea, criminal actors, they all had banner years in 2024, penetrating U.S. networks, conducting espionage, extorting ransom, stealing sensitive data. But of greatest concern to me is China's Volt Typhoon operation, which involves Chinese hackers installing malware within infrastructures. This malware lies in wait, ready to disrupt and destroy U.S. systems at a time of Beijing's choosing. This campaign penetrated numerous critical infrastructures in the United States, including ports, energy systems, and water utilities. As a military planner, I used to call this operational preparation of the battlefield. China's overarching goal in executing an operation like Volt Typhoon is to disrupt or degrade America's rail, port, and aviation systems so that the U.S. cannot rapidly mobilize military forces and get military equipment, personnel, and supplies to the battlefield. And addressing these cyber vulnerabilities is going to be really challenging because the Defense Department does not control the infrastructure on which military mobilization depends. Instead, the U.S. military relies on 18 commercial ports, 70 civilian airports, and 40,000 miles of commercial rail lines. That's how we move our troops and our equipment overseas. And these systems are largely owned by the private sector and local governments, and they're often maintained with insufficient levels of cyber resilience. To make matters worse, the energy, financial services, and manufacturing industries that drive economic productivity in our country, and the water, food, and healthcare systems that keep Americans alive, they're all equally vulnerable to this cyber attack. And both nation states and criminals out for a quick payday take advantage. And while the private sector does own this critical infrastructure, and they've definitely not done enough to invest in cybersecurity, the U.S. government is also at fault for its poor performance as a partner to the private sector. And many of the federal agencies that are responsible for what we call the public-private collaboration, some are even uninterested, and many of them are under-resourced in the mission. So I think as we look for solutions, the key challenge for the United States is to restore deterrence in cyberspace, making it too hard or too painful for an adversary to disrupt or exploit our networks and systems here in the United States. To do this requires both deterrence by denial, improving our defensive efforts, and deterrence by punishment, which is improving our ability to impose costs on an adversary overseas. In my written testimony, I provide 8 recommendations, but I just want to highlight 4 of them here, given the time constraints. First, we need to secure the critical infrastructures that support military mobility. We have to address the vulnerabilities in aviation, rail, and port infrastructure, and ensure that the Coast Guard, TSA, and FAA have the necessary authorizations and appropriations to execute their missions. And the private sector operators of these systems will need technical and financial assistance to combat the Chinese cyber attacks and ensure the availability of essential services in a time of crisis. Second, we got to prioritize assets. The United States cannot protect everything everywhere all at once. Within critical infrastructure, there are assets and entities that are more critical to U.S. national security. These assets need priority access to intelligence and incident response support. In return, the American people should expect these assets to practice a higher level of cybersecurity. Third, we need to better utilize the National Guard to defend our critical assets. The Guard uniquely bridges military and civilian sectors, as well as federal and state government authorities, making it ideally suited to respond to a domestic cyber threat. The Congress should work with the Department of Defense to determine the Guard's long-term role in the cyber protection of critical infrastructure and identify any new necessary authorities, which I don't think are many, and resources, which I think will be many, to do this. Finally, we have to recruit and develop an effective government cyber workforce. We need to hire more talent for federal, state, and local governments. We need a program that focuses on hiring graduates from vocational schools and community colleges, where students can earn skills and certifications. The Cyber Pivot Act from last Congress answers this challenge and should be re-attacked this Congress. In the past, the United States has had the luxury of thinking about how to handle a threat from an adversary state over there in their backyard. Things are different today. To make America secure, we'll have to make the investments in cybersecurity and critical infrastructure that America has postponed for far too long. Again, thank you for inviting me to speak, and I look forward to your questions.